It's that time. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another Detroit Lions mock draft with trades. I don't know what point this is, 1.0, 3.0, 7.0, I don't know. We're back with the Lions mock draft, so let's get it started.
The Detroit Lions select Aidan, Jameson Roman, Josh Pascal, Kirby Joseph, James Mitchell, James Houston. NFL draft is now officially open.
Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. And man, I'm excited to do this one. I really feel good about this one. You know, I felt good about all the other mock drafts, but this one, you get that feeling. You're like, this is good. This is good. I enjoyed this. I think these picks make sense. I can understand them. I can explain all these. Like, I feel really good about this mock draft. And again, this is just me making these picks. There are trades in this mock draft because I kind of anticipate that's going to happen based on the past 2 seasons. Now, we'll probably do a mock draft before the actual draft without trades. My predictive mock may be without trades. It probably will be without trades. However, this one has movement. And actually, this first move that we're going to do in this draft is kind of something that we talked about in our last live stream on a Monday. So it kind of fits in perfectly with that. It's something that's been talked about, I think, a lot more now, especially with some of the news that we've had around some of the teams in this draft ahead of us. So we'll get to that in a second. But yes, we're back with the mock draft. I feel really good about this one. I'm sticking to the same idea of trying to give you guys different names, all right, that I didn't put in other mock drafts. Now, sometimes we get carryover, but I don't think this one we have a lot of it. I'm going to start off with a bang, and we're going to start with the trade. And if you guys were in the live stream Monday, first off, shout out to all you guys. The support was amazing. In that stream, we did discuss what the top 2 teams could do, what the first 5 teams in this draft could do. We heard the reports that, hey, maybe a quarterback doesn't go in number 2. Talk through that scenario, as I don't think it's likely. You do have to be prepared for every situation. What if this scenario arises, and I asked you guys where Bryce Young goes 1, but at number 2, let's say a defensive player goes. Let's say at 3, Arizona doesn't move out, or maybe someone moves in for a defense player. Let's say Arizona takes one, right? And that's their plan. And then all of a sudden, at number 4, you have a team like the Indianapolis Colts. Even if they take a quarterback, then at number 5, Seattle doesn't. Okay, now you could potentially have, in that type of scenario, maybe a Carter, Will Anderson, maybe a Tyree Wilson, all off the board by the time you're sitting there at number 6, leaving you with, I don't know, maybe some of the top corners in this draft. Do you go, in my opinion, probably reach for another edge rusher? Like, what do you do at that spot if that's what the board looks like? You could just say move down, but does a team want to move up with you? That's something that we did discuss. I don't think it's going to happen. I do think we'll end up probably seeing 3 quarterbacks taken before we're on the clock, but it is a legitimate possibility. So for this mock draft, that is one thing that I kind of thought of when doing this, but also at the same time, I think it's something that's very possible. I said it, earlier in the process that I think the Lions are going to have to be willing to move the board, and I think they will be willing to move the board because they say that they build through the draft. So they were able to grab a little bit more ammo for this year's draft with the Jeff Okudah trade. And in this mock draft, I have the Lions trading up with the Arizona Cardinals to the number 3 pick in the draft. Now, the value of these trades is always difficult, so I do my best to use the trade value chart and try to get the numbers as even as possible. While it's not exact, it does kind of give you maybe a little bit of a perspective on what each draft pick's value is. That way you can try to make these, in my opinion, maybe a little bit more realistic. But then again, it really just depends on what are you moving up for. Does the team, are they comfortable with moving back? Is it something they're trying to pry for them a little bit more? How far are they moving back? So the value is difficult to kind of gauge here, but I did my best. I followed the trade value chart, and I think I got a pretty even trade on both sides. So here are the trade details before we get into the picks. So I traded away pick 6, and look, it's going to sound like a lot, but trust me, you got to have a plan. So here's what we did. We traded away pick 6 to move up to pick 3. We also give away our second first-round pick number 18, to Arizona, and we give up our second-round pick 48, our 3 first picks in this draft. It sounds like a lot, but in return, I got the 3rd pick in the draft, Arizona Cardinals 34th pick, Arizona Cardinals round 3 96th pick, and a future 4th round pick. Now, with that value, if you take out the future 4th, it's like 100 value points, I think, in favor of them actually getting more value of this deal. So I just threw in a future pick. I'm sure future picks would have to be involved. So many teams, they don't want to give away like 6 picks from this year's draft. It's like, dude, we got to take somebody this year. So this is kind of the trade value that I came up with. It may not be accurate, may be accurate, I don't know. Either way, that's the trade that we make, so let's move on from there. So, with the 3rd pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. And we're going to go a similar route, and I think this is the only player that's actually the same that we've drafted before. You guys know who it is. I'm trading up for Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle out of Georgia. And I don't want to kind of just say the same thing over and over when I draft this guy. If you have seen the other videos, of course it's about the off-the-field stuff. Of course you have to see if the character checks out from the scouting perspective. And this is a guy that, you believe at the next level is going to have that football character, because that's the separator. We know how talented he is. I believe that he's the best player that I've seen in this year's draft. Now, in saying that, I haven't watched a lot of Bryce Young, in fairness to him. Guys that I've watched, he is the best player that I think I've watched, especially when you talk about upside. A guy that's that big. Now, of course, he came into the pro day, 9 pounds heavier, didn't look great going through drills. Went through a really tough situation off the field. He said that he thinks it's going to affect his draft stock a little bit, and it may affect his draft stock, so that's very possible. But with that being said, before he came in, he played at about 315, 6'3", incredibly explosive upfield when he's asked to pin his ears back. He can play the run, handle double teams. Like, this is just an elite athlete. He's done 7-on-7s as a receiver. He's got a basketball background. You can see videos of him windmill dunking. Like, again, I don't think because of how young he is, like, this is also not a player that's like super old. With the arm length that he brings to the interior, and we've heard Brad Holmes say that, length and quickness on the interior or for defensive linemen is what we like, and obviously he possesses that. But the guy is an absolute animal, and I didn't have questions when I went through his film, and I'm going to kind of circle back around to it once again, kind of rewatch some of the stuff with like effort level and things like that. Like, that was never something that popped off to me. Then you feel your biggest need with this pick, and I know it's like, well, don't draft needs. I think it is filling a need, which is great, and positional value is a legit thing, but at the same time, I also think you're getting maybe the most talented player in the draft, so it's not just drafting for need. I think this player is an absolute animal. So yeah, you'll have to figure out the off-the-field stuff checks out, but if it does, that to me is the pick there at number 3. So there we go. We have our defensive tackle. We have the interior presence, and if it works out, him, Aidan Hutchinson, James Houston, Josh Paschal, John Kaminsky, Aleem McNeil, like, it's a nasty defensive front, and it just feels really good. That's going to be really fun to look at. Everything's always perfectly consistent in terms of run reads and how he plays certain things, but the talent is insane there. So that moves us now to pick number 34. So we jumped out of the first round. I did not trade back into the first round. I know we've talked about that. I think it's a legit possibility, especially if the Lions are eyeing quarterback there. That definitely could become Hendon Hooker if he's available that long. But since we traded out of the first round, I'm going to stay out of the first round. I'm going to go a different route. I want to give you guys different names. And man, this is a player that I just got done kind of doing my little report for. And my goodness, he is fun to watch. And usually don't get an opportunity to take a player like this, but I did. So I was going to do it. This is a guy who I probably should have looked up how to say his name. I should have done it. You're going to see the name on the screen. It is Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I don't know how to say the guy's name. Now, I feel terrible. Okay, look, I've watched the player. I got my report up on him on DoseOfDion.com. Definitely go check that out. But regardless of being able to pronounce the guy's name, I think this is a really awesome combination. Obviously, our defensive front just got nasty really quickly, but I think that's a really cool combination with Aidan Hutchinson. Now, one of his biggest weaknesses to me was the ability to actually win from the interior, which I'm thinking to myself, well, if that's one of the biggest weaknesses, looking at how the Lions are currently constructed, that's probably not the biggest issue in the world. Like, we go to that NASCAR package, and the question I usually have is who's going to win the edge, more so than who's going to be able to step in and reduce down and win on the interior. Usually a lot of guys, that's their upside, right? Hutchinson, we do that a ton with him. But now I get a guy that doesn't really thrive in that area right now. Maybe he can. I think there's things that could help improve there. But he can definitely win on the edge. 6'3", 255, good arm length, very athletic edge rusher, 34-inch vertical. He had what would have been the best recon time if it would have been at the combine, in comparison to all those guys. His was just at the pro day. And again, just like Jalen Carter, he's a very young prospect. Like, he doesn't have a lot of starts. And it's crazy because when you watch him, you would look at a guy like that and you're like, oh, there's some polish there. This guy's probably played for a minute. He has not started that many games. He's only 21 years old. This player, man, as a pass rusher, he's going to immediately bring an impact to the table. His ability to change speeds, set up offensive tackles, win with a deep bag of tricks. I mean, he can win with inside moves. He has counters to his long arm that he loves to go to. He can bend the edge. He's one of the most flexible, bendy, oily edge rushers that I've seen. I mean, he is all of those things, so it just brings such a deep bag of tricks that he can implement as a pass rusher. Honestly, I think the one thing that needs the most polish is the ability to create consistent bull rush and knockback, but you'll see it. He has that slither to just second effort win, slide off of blocks. I mean, it looks like he's just sliding off of guys. You bring that tied into the effort, the pursuit that he plays with, the youth that he also has. Now, as a run defender, that's the area where it has to get better. It's not that it's like, well, he can't do it. It's going to be a huge limitation forever. It doesn't have to be. The guy just has to become much more technically sound at playing the run, whether that's being undisciplined, leaving his lane, jumping inside to play the run, or leaving completely off the backside. He has the quickness, the lateral speed, which a lot of edge rushers you see don't, like especially some of the bigger guys, they struggle to move laterally. He has that, and that's another thing that I thought about. I thought back to games last season. We had 2 edge rushers standing up. We had Hutchinson. Hutchinson was pretty good at being able to set the edge, lateral movement, so he could protect against those zone reads, which, a lot of teams now have zone read quarterbacks. Philadelphia, right? Chicago. We had Carolina last year. So a lot of teams are going to have that ability. So last year, it felt like Hutchinson could do it. James Houston could definitely do it. But outside of that, you were like, you didn't want to put James Houston in that, John Kaminsky in that spot too much. You had some problems there. Pascal had issues in that. This guy won't. This guy will not have issues there. He moves so well. It's just about the discipline, the technical side of getting into blocks, maintaining a base, doing a better job to prepare himself to be able to stack and then shed off of those blocks. But I think this is a super fun player. He's on the ground too much. He needs to figure out pacing a little bit more. But, man, his toolbox of ways to win, tied along with his length, his size, just flexibility. I think this is an awesome combination with James Houston. And again, I think he thrives at winning the edge, not in the interior. But I can go through so many guys on our roster that can win on the interior, that can reduce down. Hutchinson, John Kaminsky, like Josh Pascal. Like, those aren't the guys that you want on the edge. You want them to reduce down. This is a guy that's going to win on the edge. Now, he flashes inside, but this is the guy that wins on the edge. So for me, I think it just makes sense. I think it's a great fit. Continuing on, we now move to pick number 55. So we don't have pick 48. That was traded away. But we do still have our second round pick in pick number 55. And again, I decided to go with a little bit of a different name here. Now, this one, really have to figure out what the Lions are looking for. Like I always say, this position is very scheme important. So with the 55th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select cornerback Clark Phillips III out of Utah. Okay, so like I was saying, this is a position that's very important in terms of the schematic fit. How does it fit schematically within your team? The guy is 5'9", 184. Those are his measurables. He's small. I get it, right? We get it. He's not a big cornerback, and his testing times aren't fantastic either. 4.5, 140, 33.5-inch vert, which is pretty good. 18 bench press reps, what stands out to me, the guy is rocked up at the cornerback position. You see that his ability to just shed blocks and shut down yards after catch. So I think that you see the strength within his game. Route strength as well, like he can control a little bit in tight quarters underneath when he is occasionally asked to press up at the line, take away slants. Like, the guy's the tone setter of a defense in that sense. So the issue here that you have is, again, the schematic side. Now, this is one where I went with the bigger cornerbacks, more of the press style. This time I'm going with a little bit more of the off coverage, a little bit more of the zone style type of cornerback that can play man. He can press up in man, like Jerry Jacobs, I guess, in a sense. This is a guy that may not be the biggest, but he can press up in man, not the fastest. The issue that you have is kind of when multiple breaks come into play, develop into, double moves, double breaks. Saw it against Jordan Addison, a huge play there. He's on the ground a little bit too often in those situations. So I think he's going to be matchup important. And, year one, it'd be interesting to see what his role would be. I think he'd probably get into a much bigger role in 2024, because if Chauncey's not brought, or CJ's not brought back to the Lions, and we'll have Cam and Sutton, we'll see what we do with Mosley. But the guy can play either slot or on the outside. We saw this past year and play a lot more slot with Utah, but he's got some of the best ball skills. I mean, people love to show me the numbers. Well, I'll give you some numbers here. How about this? 2022, 11 passes defended. 2021, he led the Pac-12 with 15 passes defended. He also had 6 interceptions this past season. He's like top 10 in school history, or in in his conference, of all time. Okay, this guy makes plays on the football. That's what he does. Whether it's off coverage, whether that's zone, he's got a sense of when routes are starting to break, and he can dive on those, especially when it's more to the field side. From a plant position, he has an electric plant and drive on the football. Again, one of my knocks in coverage was he's just on the ground too much, and I think some of that he has to overcommit because his long speed isn't fantastic, which is where you can get into some issues with certain matchups, so he kind of gets into trail spot. I also think he's a little bit stiff. You'll see that from a half turn where he doesn't have the fluidity to always flip and turn, so instead he kind of just fades back, which will probably be his technique at the next level. So he's a little bit stiff, and you'll see that he can give up inside crosser, dig routes over the middle, but he plays with route strength, he plays with anticipation, he plays with supreme ball skills, and at the same time he fits into the mentality of, I think, a very smart corner that just that wants it, the strength and the physicality that a guy at that size usually doesn't have. So I'm going with Clark Phillips here. I've really started to like this player a lot. Again, it's the specific type of cornerback. Maybe his role slot down the road, but he can play on the outside, and especially if you're going to let him play off coverage and zone, he can do that. And again, one more point to that. You look at guys that are 5'9", a lot of times you're like, well, if it's zone, it's probably got to be like diving on everything. Like, the guy could actually probably get up and press and be physical. The length isn't there, so sometimes you'll get passes that he just can't reach. But the physicality is there. So he's kind of a tank, man. I mean, I'm just saying. So I'm going Clark Phillips here at pick number 55. So our first 3 picks all go defense, and we get that figured out a little bit more. Moves us on to our next pick, and again, we're doing trades. This is not a crazy trade, but it's something that I definitely wanted to do. I wanted to get different names, like I said, but it's also a guy that ever since I've done the breakdown on him, I've kind of been like, oh, I really like this for the Lions. If somehow this could happen, I really like this for the Lions. I wouldn't be shocked this is a player that goes top 50. If this guy went top 50, I wouldn't be like, wow, how did that happen? Like, I'd be like, oh, I get it. I can understand why I wouldn't, but I think he's somewhat team specific in the sense that someone could easily fall in love with him. And if it was Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, would not surprise me because of what and the type of player that he is. So what I decided to do, our original pick was at pick 81. I decided to move up in the draft. Now, I didn't move up a ton, but I did move up to pick number 72. And again, trying to follow the trade value chart, I wanted to wait longer, but you had teams like New England, and I know they got tight ends, but you never know. Like, this is the kind of guy that they might take. So I wanted to wait longer, but I was like, nah, I'm just going to make it happen. So I gave them pick 81, also 183. Now, the value didn't add up there, so I also threw in that future pick that I traded for originally. We've done this multiple times. So again, I don't know what that would take necessarily. Maybe that's too much. Maybe it's not enough. I don't know. I'll throw it in there because it is a round 4 pick, which kind of made the value even the first time. So I don't feel like I'm cheating here. It's just giving up the original pick. So it's like I didn't gain or lose anything for the future. So I move up 9 spots, pick 72. And at pick 72, man, we get a guy that he just looks like a lion. This is tight end Tucker Kraft out of South Dakota State. Oh my goodness, I love watching this dude play. I love watching this guy play, man. And I didn't know what to expect. You hear some things about him. It's a small school, so you're like, all right, it's really got to impress me. Dude, he's impressive. And again, I don't think it's like all there right now. The testing scores say one thing, and you're like, oh, is it really like that? And then you watch him, you're like, oh, it is really like that. 6'4.5", 254. That's a big tight end, first of all. Okay, almost 33-inch arms. He's got big hands, which is very impactful for him. 36.5-inch vertical. That was more than Clark Phillips. 23 bench press reps, and he ran a sub 4.740. Like, those testing numbers, you're like, oh my goodness, that's pretty impressive. But does it demonstrate? Does the play speed there? It is there. First off, let's start with one of my favorite parts of his game. That's rack ability. All right, I know Sam Laporta. I think he's probably the best run after catch tight end because he's elusive. He makes guys miss, but this guy's not super far behind. Like, he is legit with the ball in his hands, which, again, I always go back to, okay, how did the Rams build it before? How did Brad Holmes and, the Rams do this before? Well, they did draft Higbee. They did draft Everett. Guys that could catch underneath things, make things happen with the ball in his hands. Though this guy is just that. He's a former running back in high school that, according to PFF, forced 9 missed tackles this past year, and he had 25 broken tackles, okay? They'll give him design runs, the contact balance, the strength, and some nice little speed. Like, they'll run design runs to this guy. So that's the first thing. Then the other thing, which Dan Campbell's going to love, is the nastiness, toughness, grit as a blocker. I'll use the grit word there, even though I ain't wearing the hat, okay? This is a finisher. When he gets matched up with a cornerback, he's trying to drive that dude into the ground. If he stumbles, he's not letting him get up. Like, he's nasty as a tight end. He's got force up to the second level. Good power. He doesn't get bowled over by big defensive ends. Like, he can actually hold his ground. Now, he's not going to get consistent movement, but he's not going to get pushed back. And you tie that all in with the fact that he's a good athlete. Like, the guy actually has some flexibility away from his body to make catches, some agility there, soft hands, and then, of course, what he can do after the catch. Now, again, I think technically there's things that are going to have to be cleaned up here. We have a guy that has an offensive line background working with our tight ends. He can clean up some of the technical side. But what I love is the hand size with the toughness. He latches on to people that I usually don't see from tight ends. Some offensive linemen don't latch on like this. Like, he latches and it's like there's just nowhere for the guy to go. That doesn't happen with tight ends, but he does that. It's crazy. So I think entry points need work. Route craftiness could also be improved upon. I don't think he's the most loose route runner, but he's a good athlete. So you get the ball in his hands, you let him run after the catch, and then at the same time, with soft safety blanket hands, same time you let him block, and he's going to be like an extra offensive lineman. He can play in line, he can flex out slot. So this is a player that I think he just feels like a lion. He just feels like a Lion to me. So Tucker Kraft, I love watching this dude play. He's the pick. And now we got our pairing with James Mitchell and Tucker Kraft for the future. I love this. Pick number 96. And this pick is from the Arizona Cardinals. So we stay in round 3 before we have a gap here. It's kind of like that Derek Barnes gap, right? Before we have a gap here. And as I told you guys, I want to go with a different name. All right, let's do it. Let's throw it to Purdue. Let's go get a receiver. So at pick number 96, the Detroit Lions select Charlie Jones, receiver out of Purdue. You could argue this guy like legitimately saved any kind of like draft potential that he had by transferring out of Iowa. Like that sounds harsh, but it's like Iowa's offense is so hard to watch. Go watch Sam Laporta. You're like, oh, this is disgusting. Him transferring out was massive because he got an opportunity to just go, and Purdue likes to throw the football, and you see it by the numbers. The guy had 110 receptions and 1,300 yards in one season with Purdue. He became the guy immediately with Purdue, and there's reasons for that. He brings some of the most key traits to the table. Now, understandably, he's a little bit undersized, 5'11", 176, runs a solid 40 time, pretty strong, but he's 24 years old. But again, it was just like he was at Buffalo and then at Iowa. It's like, okay, finally got an opportunity to showcase, and he did. He took off. So he was like, hey, just give me a chance, and I'm going to be that guy, and he was that dude. So he did play on the outside. It's not like he lived in a slot. A lot of guys in his draft class are really light. It's weird, but that's the case. However, there's got to be things to offset that. There's got to be things that you like then on top of that. Like, is he stronger than he looks? Maybe that's possible. I'm not saying like that's the strength for me, but instead what the strength is, couple things I'll hit on him. Route savvy. He is very route savvy. You put him in a timing offense, you let him attack zone coverage. I mean, the creativity that he brings for a guy that didn't take off until this past year is incredible. Like, he's so route savvy. Now, the biggest knock I have in terms of that is that he can kind of sell when he's going to break a little bit because he does change pace a little bit too much. But outside of that, like, he's very savvy and he posts guys up. He has feel for defenders, knows when to attack the ball. Speaking of attacking the ball, he has great hands. Great hands. I don't say that about a lot of players. Great hands. Now, he had 22 contested catches. That was technically first. That's great. It's also not great because you're like, oh, that's too many contested passes. However, the hands are really, really good as a receiver. I mean, he attacks the zone. He attacks the ball in zone coverage. He's very good in chaos. Very good hand. And there's no movement. And I think he has a very deep arsenal of pass catching techniques. If it's low, if I need to scoop it, if it's out in front, if it's a missile, like how do I need to adapt to that? Well, at the same time, there's not a lot of bobble. It's not like, oh, is he, I don't know, but it's just bop, that's mine, right? And the concentration's there. So two of the most important traits he hits on. Out strength obviously was expected to not be a strength, and it's not. You saw against like Deonte Banks, bigger corner, can be boxed out, pushed to the sideline, things like that. And I don't think he's as crafty with the ball as I would have hoped for. He's got good acceleration, but for a guy that has a punt return background, he's not very crafty with the ball in his hands, and I think he could do a little bit more as a blocker. But I'm giving you a new name here, and man, Charlie Jones took off this past year. So, we'll see what his role is, right? We got a lot of guys with 1 year left. Josh Reynolds, Khalif Freeman, I think Quintez Cephas has 1 year left, right? Marvin Jones Jr., right? The deal that he got. So, a lot of guys that maybe more next year his role becomes more like, yeah, he's the guy. But I think right now, because of his skill set, he could legitimately plug in, slot, outside, wherever you need him to play, and just be productive, be reliable. You always want reliable guys, and I think he fits really well in a timing offense like ours. That moves us on now to day number 3. So we have a gap here, and I didn't move around. Okay, I've already moved around enough. So I'm staying at pick 152, and I'm going to be honest with you guys. I know some of you guys have brought him up in streams. I do want to apologize a little bit because I kind of dismissed him, and I think I dismissed him too quickly when I originally saw him, and that's because I kind of had my mind made up on like a certain way. But if the Lions were willing to wait, they're willing to wait in this draft for a quarterback, and they still wanted to take one in day 3. There's not a lot of guys that I love. But this is a guy that could have a chance. Legit, I really think this could have a chance to make sense for the Lions. And look, I think he looks like Jared Goff. I just, like, yeah, he wears the same number. I mean, what Goff is not great at, he's not great at. He's not a dynamic athlete. There's really not a lot of, like, oh, look at his legs. Maybe the Lions want more of that. He looks like Jared Goff to me as a player. But man, he is very likable as a player as well. And I think it's almost more the intangibles that I kind of started to fall in love. As much as I could figure out about him off the field, I just really liked it. I really liked it. Now, he's older, of course. He's like 24 years old, but all of these guys are basically old coming out, aside from Tanner McKee. I mean, they're basically all old coming out. So it's more to me, and I think quarterbacks so specific with that. It's so much about the intangibles, and I think he's got those. He's such a humble quarterback. Speaks up his teammates. He's not on social media. He's not making a ton of buzz about himself. Like, he's just to himself. He works. He understands what he needs to get better at. He understands what evaluators are looking for. He understands that he needed to get more games started, so he came back for another year, while at the same time Have I even said who I drafted yet? I don't even know if I said that. At pick number 152, the Detroit Lions select Aidan O'Connell, quarterback out of Purdue. I'm sorry if I didn't say that. Led Purdue to some stuff that they really haven't done in a long time. Like, they were 9-4 in his first season as, like, the guy in 2021. I don't think they've been 9-4 since, like, 2003. All right, they were 9-4, 2022, 8-6. He helped them represent the Big Ten from their side of the conference. Has all the intangibles I think you love. Now, tangibly speaking, it's not like man, this guy he's just like, he wins, but that's not an NFL player. No, he's got NFL arm strength. He's got velocity. He's got trust in his arm. He's got confidence when he lets that thing fly. And I think he's built for this kind of timing offense that did a lot of similar things to, I think, what we did as an offense. Now, I think his biggest things, my biggest knocks are he's got to improve. I think he's got to get with a quarterback coach, someone that can help work with him. That's in terms of make sure he's not falling away from passes, resetting his base. Specifically when he gets to like the third progression, he kind of just sometimes tends to just keep his feet and then throw across his body, and the accuracy gets high, the release point gets high. It's like that's not helping your guys. And he does have too many interceptions to love. Not all of them are on him, of course, but he does have too many interceptions. Like, route detail is going to be extremely important, but his ability to attack the middle of the field, attack the second level, he's got touch, he's got legitimate accuracy, and he's got poise. My favorite part is probably the clutchness. Like, when it's 3rd and 7, there's a lot of guys that's like, well, their entire route tree just becomes dregs. That's not him. That is not what it happens. Now, he may take some sacks, and I think almost there are a couple examples. I think Michigan was an example where he like threw it up and it was like, that was not open. But where it's like, hey, dude, I get it 3rd down. You want to get the first, but just throw it away. So those things need to happen.
I want to make a quick little point here on his processing speed. A lot of quarterbacks get that. I know McKee gets that playing in that heavy RPO offense, but he does get through multiple progressions and he processes fast and gets the ball out on time, on schedule, with relative quickness in comparison to a lot of draft potential quarterbacks. When it starts to get bad is on like 3rd downs when he holds the ball, because he's going to either take a sack or he's going to try to pick up that 1st down.
At the same time, he's clutch, man. He's going to step up in those big downs. He's going to deliver. He's going to put the ball out there. He's a tough quarterback. He doesn't seem to get rattled from the outside looking in. Like, things could go wrong. Against Michigan, there was a couple like missed handoffs. I won't go into my full breakdown here. I'll be honest when I'm saying, man, like, I feel like I kind of overlooked him, especially for some of the latest guys. And he does have a little bit more of the measurables that I think a lot of teams will be looking for. 6'3", 210. A lot of guys at the end are like 6 foot, 5'11". This guy has some measurables. Now, he's not the mobile athlete, which a lot of teams fall in love with now, but if Brad Holmes fell in love with Jared Goff, and he's willing to go with, I think, a somewhat similar path, I think Aidan O'Connell makes a ton of sense. And maybe his future is just a backup, but I think that'd be fine. I mean, this is the kind of backup that I think you'd look for. So I'm going to go Aidan O'Connell. I guess I got his teammate with Charlie Jones. Talk about helping the transition. All right, we got 2 picks left. So at pick number 159, our second 5th round pick, this is an original pick, the Detroit Lions select running back Kenny McIntosh, running back out of Georgia. Okay, so now this is one, he's not like, oh, he's my highest graded running back, he's a 3-down back upside. Like, I don't see those certain things, or certain things that I legitimately just don't love about his game that I don't think are going to get better with, like, experience. He's just a certain body type. He's kind of a weird body type. All right, the guy's 6 foot 216, and that's kind of a big build. He's a little bit more leggy, like meaning he's a little bit longer of a frame. He's not like the short, stout, compact, shifty type of running back that you expect a lot of times. So he's a little bit different, but certain teams will, I think, like him because there's like a specific role that I think he'd fill. And I think for the Lions in the situation with this draft pick, I was thinking this thing through. Number one, this draft pick does not like, oh, Swift's got no role. He's Swift's replacement. Like, no. Swift still has a legitimate role. But if you didn't have Montgomery, these guys could play together. He could play with Montgomery. But at the same time, I think he also brings us something that we we legitimately lack. Like DeAndre Swift a lot. But I don't look at him as like, man, he's a dynamic 3rd-down back. Now, with that being said, Swift took massive steps as a pass protector. So I'm not knocking him there, but I don't think he has the most reliable hands. Now, he could be tough in route running, but I don't think he has the most reliable hands. Kenny McIntosh, and I've realized this going through so many running backs, is like, how many guys don't catch the ball that well at the running back position? I mean, I guess it's not a shock, but it's legit. Like, I think that's something that gets overlooked. You see highlights, you're like, oh, you can catch the ball in the backfield. Like, so many guys struggle to consistently catch the ball and make it look easy. He catches with ease. Like, that's the thing that stands out when you watch him, is his legit pass game impact, his legitimate pass protection ability, willingness. He's got the strength to kind of stand in there better than most players. Now, he can get kind of pushed back initially, but he does have better strength than most guys when standing in there. He's not super fast. He ran a 4.62 40. You see it. My thing with him is that I don't know how high the upside is. I don't think he's ever going to be like a 3-down back in the NFL because, tight quarters, inside zones, which he did a lot with Georgia. He doesn't have like the quick twitch, quick change of direction, elusiveness. He doesn't have that because he runs a little high cut. So he's better when he gets to the edges. Now he can run inside. I think he runs with good patience, adequate vision. But the issue on top of that is he just can't hit those holes consistently like he wants to, redirect like he wants to. And he doesn't have dynamic like 4.3 speed. He's a 4.62 guy. It's a little bit more build-up. He's a little bit more of a strider, but he has a really good sense when he's in open field. He's willing in pass protection. He can really catch the ball with ease. I think he'd be a really tough matchup for linebackers because he can run some depth routes. Like, he's not going to be the shiftiest back, but he can run some pretty dynamic routes. While at the same time, he's going to catch the football, which is just the biggest thing for me there. So this is a guy that in space is going to take a big play and turn it into a huge play because he kind of gets rolling with some force and he has good vision at the next level to set up blockers and set up defenders. But I don't think the 3-down upside's there. So certain teams I don't think are going to be super interested. He's also a little bit older, 23 years old, which isn't great either, but he was behind a lot of guys. He was behind DeAndre Swift at one point there in Georgia. So I'm going to go with Kenny here because I think he has legit role. Like, we could keep 3 running backs, Swift, Kenny. Let's say in this scenario we kept David, Swift, and Kenny. Like, he still would have a role to me there. Now, obviously, when you get to third downs, if Swift and David are healthy, they may still lead Swift. But I think Kenny's giving him a run for his money. Let's say you don't have David. Swift is the guy. Kenny is now the number 2. When you don't have Swift, easy projection to push him in. So, at this point in the draft, he was, according to PFF, the top back available. It's hard. I haven't gotten to all of the late round running backs, but I don't love a lot of them. But Kenny is one of these guys that I do think can fill a specific role, and I think the role makes sense for what we have. And then finally, I'm going to finish it off at pick number 194, one that I'm not completely sure on, but definitely because of who is available. Like, a lot of those guys, I don't love them, or maybe I don't think the fit's there. But this is a guy that intrigues me a little bit. I'm going to have to watch more of him, but I'm going to take John Gaines II out of UCLA. I think he's like 6'4", 305 pounds. The biggest thing that stands out is his testing numbers. 32.5 inch vertical, showing off the explosiveness. 8-second 3-cone drill. 19 bench press, which isn't crazy. Pretty good 3-cone drill. Like, he showed off that he was a pretty good athlete. Actually, a really nice athlete compared to a lot of these later round guys. And, when I look at the Evan Browns and guys like that, like, powerful, explosive athletes, ability to redirect, change direction, I think could really benefit your transition into the next level, especially when you're trying to ask him to play guard. He's got a right guard and center background, more so center in 2021. He played more center. This is not like a surefire knockout of the park, I don't think, type of pick at this time. I think his biggest knock that I had early was his consistency to latch and maintain sustained blocks, especially when he had like blitzers come up late, or you had a guy like USC was a good example. Thule was giving him some problems. He would walk up on him and kind of pop him, and he had trouble kind of like latching and holding on to that. It's like the speed caught him off guard, but he showed legitimate explosiveness to change direction. He's the athlete that you would like to pull, and he's also got really fast eyes, nice reaction. So I think just athletically speaking, he checks a lot of boxes here. I mean, there's different options that I could have went with, but I thought it was a really intriguing name, and obviously PFF doesn't have all the offensive linemen out there, so for me, it's still kind of a limited pool that I can actually choose from, but I stuck to PFF. I didn't go outside of it and just pick someone different for this mock. So I'm going to go with John Gaines II here out of UCLA. He's just an intriguing option. 33 and basically 1/2 inch arms. Very long arms, similar to a guy like McFadden who plays tackle that looks like he's going to move to guard. So length also in the interior, you don't see that a ton, and that can be huge. So that's my pick to round out this mock draft, man. I think we got all but one different names, and the only same name was Carter at 3. And look, a lot of times that's going to happen because it feels like, if you're going to pick that high, there's only a few guys that maybe you're going to be interested in. But outside of that, all new names. I love this mock. I just think there's a lot of fits here. I think immediately our cornerback position is better now, but could get really good for the future. Smart corner fits in. We'll just have to see schematically what they want to do with that. Felix is going to be a day one impact as a pass rusher. He's got to improve his run defense, and I think that's the biggest concern with the pick. But if he can continue to improve the technique side of it, him and Hutchinson could be really nice, kind of making James a little bit more of like a specialist, which is fine, and he can really win on the edge going forward. And again, we have Romeo Charles to help buy him some time, I think, a little bit as well. Jalen, I think, completes the interior of the defensive line for the most part, and it also still leaves a gap because I didn't double up on it for Levi to potentially, get healthy and step into a role. Tucker Kraft is going to immediately step in, probably be our number 1 tight end. Again, polish needs to be done there, especially considering the competition they went against. But an athlete at that size with that mentality, He's like the Cody Mao of tight ends. And then we get Charlie Jones in there, who I'm really liking as a possession guy, second level, ability to separate the first level, even though he kind of gets boxed out on some of the press spots, which I didn't love. That's got to get better. Like Clark Phillips will stuff guys at the line, try to run like slants. This is a guy, Charlie Jones, that can get stuffed on those. So that's not fantastic, and a route strength is a big question. We'll see if we can potentially put some on. But at the same time, I think what you see is also a guy that, because of the way that he runs, because of the way that he works and sets up releases and the craftiness he has in the first 2 levels, he can separate at those levels with tough hands, and you can throw him into windows, and he'll go get that football. O'Connell, I love the backup for Jared Goff there, especially if I'm going to do it late. He's one of my favorites at the end of the draft. Maybe my favorite at the end of the draft, man. I was sleeping on this dude. I think I really was. His report will be on DoseOfDion.com. Kenny McIntosh, I think he's got a really good role. And then John Gaines, mixing it up. Different name, but definitely a guy that can play center or guard. And we'll see. Big V's coming off an injury. Glam Glasgow's a nice helper, but maybe next year's role's again bigger here. But hey, after what we had last season interior offensive line, I'm never afraid to do it. Biggest thing is I didn't get a linebacker, and I think it's legit possible. I was telling Ray, I think it's legitimately possible we don't. I think if I was a betting man, I would say we do draft one, but that's not how this mock went down, and I wasn't just going to force the pick. So with that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.